Massive explosion in growth of imprisonment in the United States, especially since the 1980s. As I'm sure many of you know, we're the most imprisoning country in the world. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. We're not just the most imprisoning country in the world, we're the most imprisoning country of all time. We're the most imprisoning civilization of all time. We have a project that is untold, unheard of, sort of shockingly, wildly huge, and that project, from its start and to this day, intensely targets people of color. People say that 60 to 70% of people in prison are people of color, and I just heard the statistic that I thought really was interesting, given our recent media focus on the experiences of black youth. 6% of the youth population in the United States is black. 58% of the youth population who's sentenced to adult prison is black. So, I mean, we could just do statistics all day about the racial targeting, but I thought that one was pretty stark. But in every phase of the process of criminalization, the entire process is racially targeted in arrest, sentencing, access to alternatives, treatment inside prison, and collateral consequences coming out of prison, like exclusion from housing programs and things like that. And this system is also targeted at people with disabilities, at queer and trans people, at women, at immigrants, etc. So there's a lot of ways it's targeted sort of at poor people, right, at all the people who already are sort of marginalized in our broader framework. So part of what I want to think about today in terms of the way that we get seduced to become part of the process of building or expanding that prison project, for me, as somebody who studies law, I'm interested in how there's a story in the United States that's a really powerful national story. That if you're part of a community or population that's experiencing like really terrible marginalization and discrimination and harm, you should change the law. That is the way you should seek to change the lives of people in your group, right? That's the story in the United States. And that story is really important right now, I think, for trans people, which is like a lot of the work I do is around trans people's experiences, because trans people are a population like that, right? As I'm sure you all know, trans people are wildly economically marginalized, experience intense poverty, criminalization and immigration enforcement. Trans people have this like really elaborate matrix of problems with basic systems like ID systems and systems of sex segregation, all of which exist to enforce gender norms and do so really violently in spaces like foster care and prisons and jails and shelters. So trans people are functionally excluded from most social services, and also are targets of extreme police violence, and then also lots of other violence at the hands of sort of state officials and state employees, like people in the foster care system, people in the immigration system, in the mental health system, etc. I'm not going to go into detail about that. I think a lot of people here might already know about that sort of matrix of violences and harms that trans people face. And so the story that we're certainly told is that, you know, the obvious thing for trans people to do is to take up a project of changing the law in order to address the horrific problems that trans people face.